This is the digital channel of the General Overseas Service of All India Radio. I am Manoj Mainkar, and in the next half hour, I'll bring to you news updates from India and around the world, awareness videos on coronavirus by Government of India, and a lot more. We'll begin with the news updates.
This is the General Overseas Service of All India Radio. Namaskar, the news snippets. The Prime Minister has hailed the passage of the Farmers' Produce Trade and Commerce Promotion and Facilitation Bill, the Farmers' Empowerment and Protection Agreement on Price Assurance and Farm Services Bill, and the Essential Commodities Amendment Bill by both the Houses of Parliament. Mr. Modi said it is a historic moment. Farmers would now be completely free to sell their produce at the most remunerative prices. Senior commanders of India and China are meeting today for working out mechanisms to carry forward the agreement between Indian and Chinese foreign ministers. India has emphasized that complete disengagement would be an essential prerequisite for de-escalation. 8 members of the Rajya Sabha have been suspended for creating ruckus in the House. Chairman of Rajya Sabha said that the 8 members' behavior was unacceptable and tarnished the image of the House. The iconic Taj Mahal has reopened for public after 6 months. Only 5,000 visitors will be allowed per day. Visitors would have to wear masks and maintain social distancing. The historic Agra Fort has also reopened. 2,500 visitors would be allowed in the premises for the present. Prime Minister Narendra Modi today inaugurated 9 highway projects worth 14,000 crore rupees in Bihar. He also inaugurated optical fiber internet services through which all the 45,945 of the state will be connected. For the third straight day, India reported less active cases than recovered COVID-19 cases. 93,356 recoveries were reported in the last 24 hours, taking the total recoveries to 43,96,339. Recovery rate has gone past 80%. 7,31,534 tests were conducted in the past 24 hours for COVID-19 throughout the country. According to European Centre for Disease Prevention and Control, new restrictions imposed by many European countries are required as a second wave of SARS-CoV-2 coronavirus could worsen in winter. Many countries have seen an increase in death rates. Opposition parties in Pakistan have launched an alliance to oust the current regime. A 26-point joint resolution was adopted by the All Parties Conference consisting of Pakistan People's Party, Pakistan Muslim League, Nawaz, and Jamiat Ulema-e-Islam Fazl, and several other parties. They would be starting a movement against the Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf government. US would go ahead for reimposing sanctions on Iran, going against the UN Security Council resolution. And that is the end of the news snippets.
As I walked out of Bhubaneswar's Biju Patnaik International Airport, I asked my driver the distance to Konark. "Sir, I will get you there in 90 minutes, he replied. As we sped down the lush green countryside, I could not help but notice how things have changed over the years. During my last visit, it was rare to see a car passing. Now it seemed half the population of Bhubaneswar were well on their way to Konark. I ask myself why Konark attracts so many visitors, not only from India but also from abroad. Posing the same question to Jaina, my guide for the day, his eyes shine with the pride of the grand past. He goes on to say, Konark means corner of the sun. The temple of Konark is dedicated to the powerful sun god Surya. The foundation of the sun temple was laid nearly 8 centuries back. The legend has it, the statue of the sun god Surya was suspended in mid-air by a magnet so powerful it even disrupted the passing ships. Unlike 7 other temples in India dedicated to the sun god Surya, Konark was the most famous. The next day, I get up early, maximizing the benefit from the early morning wake-up call. I leave the hotel just before dawn on a Saturday morning. The place is shrouded in inky blackness. Gradually, the morning begins to stir with a rooster crowing, followed by more roosters in unison as I walk towards the beach. The darkness dissipates and there's a small break in the horizon. I remember Homer's rosy-fingered dawn breaking yonder. From the beach, it's a truly marvelous sight to watch the first rays of the sun hit the sun temple. Slowly the sun's rays strike the 7 recumbent horses to say, "Wake up, the charioteer is ready, it is time to go." Driving the sun god Surya on his daily rounds, the sun slowly works its way into the deepest recesses of the temple, past the Natya Mandir, caressing the wheels of the chariot. I take the mandatory dip in the sea before walking to the temple. The sea water is said to be so powerful to cure all skin diseases, including leprosy. By the time I reach the Sun Temple, my guide is already there. Jaina gives an interesting version of the sculptures. The first level of sculptures is a child's eye view. Remember Alice in Wonderland. Many of us can relate to as children. Top of the table was above our line of vision. This interpretation sounds interesting. Sculptures in Konark Sun Temple in the lowest level is something a small child can relate to. Elephants, thousands of them, small, big, in a never-ending procession. In the next higher level, older children would enjoy sculptures of women singing and dancing. Upper level is for a mature person, with sculptures of war and bloodshed including executions. Topmost level are figures of gods for an elderly audience. I asked Jaina, what about the erotic figures on the temple? It is said it has more erotic sculptures than even Khajuraho. He explains nonchalantly, childless couples were advised to first bathe in the nearby Bay of Bengal and stay for 21 days in Konark, possibly to observe a visual course in procreation etched on the temple walls. That's 13th century sex education for you, sans TV and internet. I promised to take up Jaina's invitation to visit Konark during the first week of December, when renowned artists in their own field of Odissi, Bharatnatyam, Chau, Kathak and other folk, tribal and classical dances perform in the open-air theatre beneath the stars with the majestic Sun Temple at the backdrop. Leaving Konark, the words of the great art historian comes to mind. Charles Fabry commented, "Had Konark been discovered first and the Taj Mahal at Agra later, then there's no doubt that Taj would have taken a second place in the mind of the world." State Highway 13 runs from Konark to Dhauli. Nearing the open plains of Dhauli, one could easily imagine Emperor Ashoka with his massive army and ruler of one of the largest kingdoms in the world at that time, surveying his opponent from a vantage point. What happened in the plains of Dhauli was momentous. Emperor Ashoka unleashed a brutal and bloodiest war in recorded history. With a massacre of 300,000 combatants, the river Daya ran red with blood for days. One could imagine the afterthought coursing through the mind of the emperor, mother losing their sons, wives their husbands in this very place. Of the 84,000 edicts that are spread throughout the length and breadth of India, a handful of them are in Dhauli, etched on rocks, an indelible reminder of the effect of violence and bloodshed and the lessons learned from this terrible slaughter on the battlefield of Dhauli. Edicts in Brahmi script mention the need for compassion to all sentient beings. Emperor Ashoka won a victory, no doubt, but it was one of the few times in history that the conquered people won over the heart and mind of the conqueror. It was an early morning exercise climbing up the steps to the Dhauli Shanti Stupa, built more than 40 years back in collaboration with the Japanese Buddhist sect. Enjoy a spectacular and 360-degree panoramic view of the countryside from the stupa, with the river Daya meandering through. The many Buddhas in various forms surrounding the stupa seemed to emanate a silent prayer for the need of compassion to all men and animals. I decided on the spur of the moment to divert my journey to Bhubaneswar, a 20-minute drive to the Yogini temple at Hirapur close to Dhauli. There are many unanswered questions about the 64 Yogini temples, a rarity as only 4 such temples exist in the world today. Rarer still is a roofless temple constructed in a circular formation. I posed the question to the resident guide on what lay behind this temple constructed in such a remote place. My query went unanswered. The mystery of the 64 yoginis may rank as one of the unsolved mysteries of the 21st century. Dehija, an authority and writer on the 64 yoginis, in her book goes on to say these temples were esoteric. Early texts speak of these goddesses worshipped to gain an array of occult powers, and those who did not follow this tradition would be cursed. The Tantras reiterate that this was a highly secret hidden knowledge. It was to be given only to the initiated. This cult to the 64 yoginis leaves several unanswered questions, where they illuminated like the powerful Knight Templars. Your guess is as good as mine.
Today's commentary is entitled Last Week in Parliament, scripted by Yogesh Sood. The monsoon session of Parliament got underway from September 14th with strict safety protocols in place. The proceedings of both houses are taking place without leave even on Saturdays and Sundays. Each house sits for 4 hours per day, with one session in the morning and another in the afternoon. This would provide for a total of 18 sittings across the monsoon session. 3 major issues that dominated last week included the COVID-19 pandemic, 11 bills to replace ordinances, and the border stand-off with China. Prime Minister Narendra Modi expressed confidence that this session will give a very strong message that both houses are standing behind our brave soldiers guarding the borders in one voice. Prime Minister also struck a cautious note stating that the session was taking place under special circumstances and asserted that the members have chosen the path of duty. Defence Minister Rajnath Singh told the Lok Sabha that India was fully prepared to deal with any situation and that the morale of Indian troops deployed at heights of 15,000 feet remained high. He blamed China for attempting to unilaterally alter the status quo of LAC and said that while India wanted to peacefully resolve the ongoing military confrontation, it was fully prepared to deal with any situation. Defence Minister, making a similar statement in Rajya Sabha on the situation in eastern Ladakh, asserted that no force in the world can stop Indian soldiers from patrolling the country's borders in Ladakh. In the period since the last session, the government has issued 11 ordinances. 5 of these relate to COVID-19 crisis and the lockdown, extending tax filling dates, moratorium on new insolvency cases, protection for health workers, and temporary cuts in salaries and allowances of members of parliament and ministries. Of the other, 2 relate to supersession of the boards of the councils that regulate homeopathy and Indian systems of medicine. 1 allows the Reserve Bank of India to regulate cooperative banks, while 3 other relate to agricultural markets. The bills introduced in Rajya Sabha include the Salaries and Allowances of Ministers Amendment Bill 2020, the Epidemic Disease Amendment Bill 2020, the Homeopathy Central Council Amendment Bill 2020, and the Indian Medicine Central Council Amendment Bill 2020 have been introduced in the Rajya Sabha through voice vote. All the 4 bills are already in force as ordinances. Union Health Minister Dr. Harshvardhan told the Lok Sabha that the nationwide lockdown was a bold decision by the government. It is testimony to the fact that Indians collectively stood up to manage COVID. During the proceedings, Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman sought Parliament's nod for additional spending of 2.35 lakh crore rupees, which includes a cash outgo of 1.60 lakh crore rupees, primarily to meet expenses for combating the COVID-19 pandemic. The government also introduced 3 bills on farm sectors, namely Farmers, Produce Trade and Commerce, Promotion and Facilitation Bill, the Farmers Empowerment and Protection Agreement on Price Assurance and Farm Services Bill, and the Essential Commodities Amendment Bill, which will replace ordinances promulgated by the government earlier. Union Agricultural Minister Narendra Singh Tomar asserted that these bills will help farmers get a remunerative price for their produce, as well as private investments and technology. Prime Minister Narendra Modi termed the 3 bills passed by both houses as historic. Mr. Modi said that farmers have been given new independence. They will now have more options and opportunities to sell their produce. It was necessary to bring these measures to protect them from middlemen. The Rajya Sabha also approved a bill to suspend insolvency proceedings for up to a maximum of 1 year against fresh COVID-19 related default from March 25th this year. Replying to a debate in the upper house, Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman said that the aim of the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code (IBC) is to keep companies as going concern rather than liquidating them. The Lok Sabha passed the taxation bill that seeks to provide various reliefs and transparency in tax administration to the taxpayers.
This broadcast came to you from the digital channel of the General Overseas Service of All India Radio.